starting the recording again, so we'll get just a quick walkthrough of Aurora's data and why it matters. Many of you who are longtime supporters might know that in 2014, Aurora really started to invest in gathering research and data on the status of women and girls. We did the first ever needs assessment for women and girls in Greater Hartford. And from that, we produced the Aurora report. And we released different, these kind of graphic summaries of key points around 10 key research areas. And then we updated those in 2018 and with updates on women's economic security, education, leadership, and college success. And you can find all of those on our website under the research tab. And I'm super proud of the work that we did on those. They were really terrific. But when I was asked to be on the transition committee for Governor Ned Lamont on the Women and Girls Committee, what we found was we needed better data, right? We needed statewide data. Aurora had lots of data about Greater Hartford, but when we wanted to make a larger case about what the state of Connecticut needed, we needed to be able to make some larger claims. And so I started working to see if the other women's funds in the state wouldn't kind of come together. A lot of them have produced kind of research reports about their own towns that they serve. But really there was going to be a lot more power in us all coming together to share. So we built this, what I am super proud of, the Connecticut Women and Girls Data Platform. And this launched just last December. We've already had over 1,000 people use it. And what it does is it covers, let me see, I'm not sure if what you can see with the little thing, but it covers these key areas: demographics, health and safety, education, economic security, and civic participation. And then you can look at that data based on geography. So whether you want to think about statewide or by county or by city, then you can begin to compare this information. So it is super cool to use. If we look at the economic security tab and we look at women in poverty, right, we can see that in Connecticut, 11% of women live in poverty. But if we look at the city of Hartford, that number skyrockets to 30%, right? So that we can begin to then get some understandings of where some of the economic impacts of COVID-19 are going to be felt the most, right? That they're going to be concentrated in Hartford. If we look at, let's see, what are some of my other favorite data on here? So if we look at female heads of households earning below and above the ALICE threshold, so really when you think about the ALICE threshold, you're talking about a kind of minimum level to pay childcare costs, rent, food, transportation. And when we look at Hartford, we see that for women who are under 65, 80% of them are not making a living income, right? So they're below the ALICE threshold. They can't meet basic expenses, right? So we get a sense of the impact of poverty for women and girls in our region, right? Then just to show you a couple of other fields on the super cool tool, right? If we think about in Connecticut, 22% of women across the state have a bachelor's degree. That remains pretty much the same for Hartford County. But when we look at the city of Hartford, right, you see that dramatic change, right? We're down to 8% of women have a bachelor's degree, which again informs the importance of the grant making that we're doing, right? If we can get more women a college degree, then you start to see this uptick, right, in median earnings by educational attainment. So if you have a bachelor's degree in Connecticut, your median income is about $52,000. Whereas if you have less than high school, we're talking $19,000, right? So a huge change. But I have recently really become interested in looking at this huge disparity that I can see between Hartford County and Hartford City. So if you live in Hartford County, your bachelor's degree gets you a median income of $53,000. But in the city of Hartford, that shrinks to $38,000. So to me, that suggests a research question for Aurora. What is going on with that gap, right? And when we're thinking about women and girls, we also have to think about pay equity gaps, right, that are super important. As we're thinking about the effects of COVID, we can look at this health and safety data to look at who has insurance coverage, right? And we see the blue bars are women, right? That they have generally less health insurance coverage than men across Connecticut. But if we look at the city of Hartford, what we see here is this big gap for girls, right? The girls less than 5, 6% of them, right, don't, they're much higher rate of not having health insurance. So as we're looking to look at the effects of COVID on women and girls, that's the kind of places that we want to look. So the data platform, so this was our first take on it. I'm in the process of negotiating with the other women's funds for us all to pool some more money to get all of these data sets that we have updated and to add a bunch of new data sets and topic areas so that this will become an evolving and exciting tool going forward that lots of people can use. And I just want to share a couple of, right now I'm working on really thinking what kind of data we need to assess the impact of COVID-19 on the women and girls in our region. So we can look at both the data that we had before the crisis, right, that I showed you about the large numbers of women in poverty in Hartford, but we're gathering new data, right, that we'll add and put together. We're planning to do a big convening I'm trying to get the other women's funds to do some additional in-depth research reporting so that facts like that 67% of the low-wage workforce in Connecticut is women, right? We really know that they're going to be hit hardest. We can add in information about wage gaps to this analysis, right? So that while we know that women make up 85% of home health care aides, right, and 60% of those are women of color, the wage gap for that field is $5,000 a year. So what does that lost $5,000 mean to these women that are essential workers, right? It's huge. A similar kind of gap happens for grocery store workers. The thing that is really shocking me at the moment is that it's the first time in Connecticut's history that women's unemployment applications are surpassing men's. So in that worst week of, right, they were up at 63% of the applications were women. We also know from recent data that you were twice as likely to be applying for unemployment if you don't have a bachelor's degree, right? So again, when we're thinking about not only who's going to be hit hardest by COVID, but how do we recover and rebuild, Aurora's focus on access to college for women really helps insulate them um, from these kind of employment and economic shocks, right? That we're building in a kind of resiliency for the women and girls in our community. Childcare, as we all know, right, was a crazy afterthought during the pandemic. And what we're seeing, what was already the case in Connecticut, is that childcare was costing people 28% of the median income, or $19,000 a year, right? You could send your kid to in-state college, right, for a similar amount of money. And what we are also seeing is that small home-based daycares are not going to be able to reopen in the era of COVID. And so women can't go back to work. Many of those small daycares are owned by women of color, right? So there is this kind of cascading economic effect that we'd really like to be talking more about. I recently, just to talk about really cool collaborations that Aurora is working on. So every week I join a call with the Women's Funding Network. So it's a national network. It's actually international, of women's funds and executive directors of those funds across the country. And so out of that came a recent opportunity. The New Mexico Women's Fund, who is headed by this amazing woman, they were putting together a white paper on the housing impacts of COVID-19 for women. And so they invited everyone to send in their data. So that sent me off doing my own little home research project that we can then use going forward, but looking at the kind of impending COVID housing crisis that's coming. So evictions are expected to double in Connecticut. And that means 14,000 households are in danger of being displaced. And right now Connecticut has a temporary rental housing assistance line that you can call. They're getting on average, which means some days it's way over this, about 1,000 calls a day. And only 170 of those calls generally qualify for assistance, right? So that means the vast majority of those people aren't getting any help. And we're going to have a similar crisis with mortgage delinquencies, right, and foreclosures. Connecticut ranks 10th right now in mortgage delinquencies. So the economic picture is pretty bleak, and it's going to hit women and girls the hardest. So that's the kind of, so why I'm excited that we could partner on New Mexico on this is that they were putting together a kind of national perspective and going to try and use it to lobby actually in Washington, D.C., right? So that we can be, even though Aurora is a small fund in a small state, right, we can join with these other funds across the country to advocate for women and girls, right? Our whole mission. So I think data is incredibly nerdy, but incredibly important. And until we can measure the gaps, until we can get a picture of what these impacts are, we can't advocate for the right things, right? So that's why it's so crucial.
Well, and data, data tells a story. As nerdy as it might be, it's sort of the why of what we're doing. And pick your favorite piece of data that Jenny just looked at, and use that as your reason why to give the $100 to join the Luminary Luncheon. It's not that you're going to get a delicious salad and get to see your friends at another table. It's for this reason why we're doing it. And we haven't even begun to see the real impacts of COVID. The picture is bleak before. The picture is going to be devastating in the months to come. That's the why. That's our why. And I think it will resonate with the caring people who come to our luncheon. I don't think they'll miss the salad.
Well said, Kathy. Thank you.
Well, and
It actually makes me want to cry just seeing
Oh,
these
I did. I
numbers.
just got goosebumps.
Yeah, it just really makes me so sad to see these numbers, and and we know it's only going to get so much worse.
and I still don't see women rising up on the priority list, right? As we think about relief and recovery, there's this kind of expectation that somehow resources are going to trickle down to them. And we just know that that's not how it works, right? That when we center women and girls, we'll get solutions that are better for the whole community, right? When we start with them. And that's really what I see Aurora going forward, it's just our job to keep shouting it until we can make people listen. Or get ourselves put in charge is the other strategy. Right?
And get ourselves in charge. Aurora.
So does anybody have any questions that I can answer about? I know that was a lot of data to share all at once.
And you're going to be sharing this data at the luncheon itself?
I'm going to be talking about, yes, about key pieces of it and letting people know about the Women and Girls Data Platform.
Okay, that's very, very convincing as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and it's not something that we usually have space for in the luncheon. So I'm really excited to be able to, because I think it's such a key piece of what Aurora does. It goes beyond the grant making dollars to really be able to impact kind of policy making, nonprofits, providing them the capacity, right, they use this data to make their case in their grants. I love it. Sometimes people will send me the citations when they've applied for a grant and used our data. Or like Kathy, Grace Academy put it in their appeal to donors, right? They cited Aurora data.
Right. I think they linked the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's your behind the scenes look at Aurora today. Thank you all so much. We couldn't do this without you. I every day when I am feeling overwhelmed, I think about, I get to work with amazing women. Like I get to, at least virtually, hang out with you all. And it is really what keeps me going. And you are what keeps the women and girls in Greater Hartford top of mind. And it means everything.
I think that we have to thank you, Jenny, and also Marie for doing such a good job.
Marie, yay!
Yeah.
Smoke and mirrors. Thanks so much, Susan. That's sweet of you.
I was poor Marie. She has to hear me grunt today. I'm like, I don't want to learn any more about how Zoom works. I'm very tired of figuring out, but
we're grateful for each other, right? We're grateful that we both. So thank you all so much. And we'll be in touch. We'll be getting all of this information out to you this afternoon.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Marie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.